Welcome.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for that, Alex. Good morning, everybody. I'm Nolene and I work in Lergas. I work under the European Solidarity Corps, and I'm here this morning with my colleague Alex, who's looking after all the technical side of things. Just to remind you again, the session is recorded, so if you prefer to have your cameras off, please do that. So today is our second webinar Wednesday in our third webinar Wednesday series. And today's session is on the importance of good partnerships. We're really lucky today to have a facilitator and a guest speaker. So Nora Furlong is our facilitator. Nora has a huge amount of experience in not just facilitating in youth work and education and the whole non-formal and informal education sector, and a lot of experience in Erasmus Plus as well, and running projects and working with young people. So Nora will be taking the session in a couple of minutes, and our guest speaker is Peter Hussey, and Peter will be giving us the benefit of his vast experience of managing both European Solidarity Corps and Erasmus Plus projects and the importance of partnerships and all of that. So I'm going to step aside now and hand you over to Nora, and enjoy the session and look forward to chatting to you as we progress through the next hour. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a million, Nolene. Welcome everyone. We're a small little group this morning, which I think works really well sometimes, particularly for this particular theme on good partnerships, because it means we can have a bit of interaction and conversation. And Peter is with us to share his experience of working with his partners during COVID times, and has a wealth of experience to offer. And yeah, as Nolene mentioned, I'm a massive advocate of Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps programs. I've been using the funding to implement projects with young people for a good many years. And I know that good partnerships is one of the key components to making these projects work. And like all relationships, they're complex and they have to be carefully approached. And there are ways and means to put good foundational and fundamentals in place before a project begins, and indeed during and after a project as well, to maintain good relationships. So that's going to be our focus for this morning. The session is only an hour long, so I will keep time, and we will assure you that we'll be logging off at 11:30 punto. So because there's so few of us, we'd be really interested to hear as well yourselves, who's in the room. Are you coming in as a newcomer or experienced in implementing projects, and what would you like to take away from today? So Christina, I can see you. Would you tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're here today?
Yes, sure. Good morning, everyone. So, hi, I'm Christina from the Wheel, working as a European Programs Officer there. And I'm kind of here in a double role because we're having this project that is called Access Europe, and it's about managing and funding EU funds. And also part of us is looking at the partnership aspect of EU funded projects. So for us, it's interesting on the one hand to see what are we talking about here and to learn from this. And also on the other hand, I have been involved in European projects myself, especially Erasmus Plus, and also in partnership building activities. So it's kind of yeah, double-sided here. Like my role is like two perspectives.
Super, thanks Christina, you're very welcome. And Sinead, would you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, just give me 1 minute. My microphone kicks in and out at times, so bear with me. I'm from Waterford Libraries in the southeast. I'm based in the Central Library there, and I'm the Work Matters Coordinator for the whole service. And in our Central Library branch, we also have the Europe Direct Information Centre. So I'm just here to find out more about kind of, you know, what it's about, and then just kind of just to learn, really, you know.
Super. So you haven't you haven't been a beneficiary yet for Erasmus funding?
No. I just kind of came across this online and thought, oh, that sounds really interesting, and we might benefit from it. So
absolutely. Well, you're very, very welcome, and hopefully, yeah, you'll be inspired to step further into the program after today. And Severine, is it? Hello. Am I pronouncing it right?
Hold on. Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So Am I to introduce myself? Yes.
Yes, please tell us who
Okay.
you are and your experience with Erasmus and European Solidarity Corps and why you're here today.
Okay, so I'm an English teacher. I teach both French and English in the VET high school. I've been I've been a coordinator of one Erasmus project with partners, European partners, and I have been participating in a consortium. Do you say this? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And so about 15 students went on work placement abroad, and I'm still on other Erasmus Plus projects.
Super. And where are you dialing in from today?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. What do you mean?
Where are you based?
Oh, I'm based in the south of France.
You're lovely. Well, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And Derval, can you hear us? Hello, Derval. Okay, we'll come back to Derval. So, oh, Derval is typing. Can you unmute Derval and tell your computer's not working? Okay, that's no problem, Derval, at all. Maybe you can type into chat where you're logging in from today and your organization, and maybe we'll come back to you. Okay, so I am going to a teacher in St. John's in Cork. You're very welcome, Derval. Thanks for being here. I'm just going to share my screen for a moment and just revisit the objectives of today's session. And so the agenda is we are going to go straight to Peter now in a moment, who's going to tell us where he's from and his background and organisation, and share some insights into how he's managed working with his partners in the past year and beforehand. We have some discussions that we'd like you to engage in a breakout room. And then we are going to share some resources from our end and recap and close the session. So just to revisit the objectives of the session, COVID-19 has brought new emphasis to the importance of good partnerships in EU projects. Good communication and partnership building takes time to cultivate and can have big consequences if things go wrong. So today's session, we would like to explore good practice in partnership building and explore how to manage a breakdown in partnerships, what we've learned from COVID-19, and how do we bring that learning forward. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Peter, who will you introduce yourself, Peter, and tell us a little bit about your work?
Absolutely. And we just pick up the last message there from Derval, that she's been doing Erasmus and is learning how to do the Erasmus as the lead person has been moved. Very good. Okay, well, hopefully this session and many like it will help you do that. So I'm Peter Hussey from Crooked House Theatre Company, which is based in a small company based in Newbridge. We work with young people from the age of 11 up to 25, thereabouts. And there's no cutoff really, it's up to 30, I suppose. But mostly young people tend to move on, from after they leave university onto various projects and countries and so on after that. So our main cohort is like the age of 17, 18 and 19, older teenagers. We use theatre for many different processes. First, to make theatre and to understand the learning that's in theatre as an aesthetic value in itself, making wonderful shows, expressing their ideas and opinions and so on. And we also use theatre to build and develop resilience, which is like lots of different skills that help people cope with change, I guess. Cope with sudden change that they're not necessarily prepared for. And theatre making in a group really develops those skills. So we do a lot of work in that area. There are two big areas. in Erasmus, we have benefited from it a lot. It used to be called Youth in Action back in the 2000s, and we got involved with making partnerships with people with whom we had already got a relationship. So, you know, we started from a position of knowing the other people, and we were wondering, how can we get assistance from Europe to build work together? So we had 2 or 3 other youth theatres in Britain, in France, and in Italy that we wanted to connect with and to make work together with. And we discovered the Youth in Action program, which subsequently became Erasmus. And we found that this was a wonderful vehicle for helping us bring together the young people in many different ways, through training programs, through exchange of good practices, through going to study and spend some time with the other company and see what they're doing that we could rob and come back with, and to bringing the young people together. So there was a range of ways that we used, and we jumped into that particular swimming pool and haven't come out of it since. We're swimming away there, looking at all these projects and doing loads of them as we go. So COVID, as a result, we've built up a kind of a network that has lasted over the years from our participation in various projects and from initiating projects. So we've got this network already of partners who do more or less the same kind of thing that we do. That's what is interesting because it doesn't really exist formally, this idea of a European-wide network of young theatre makers, youth theatres. Certainly there is a network of professional theatres, like there would be a network of librarians, of community organisations, but not necessarily of youth theatre makers, because in many places that concept doesn't actually exist. You know, it's considered more amateur theatre, or it's part of a professional theatre's outreach capacity. So one of our aims is to build an awareness of what youth theatre is across Europe and help establish various projects in different countries. So with that in mind, then COVID, we were doing lots of projects. You know, we would have done training programs with other facilitators from different countries. We would have done exchanges in our country and in other countries where we bring our young people together for typically 7 days. And during that 7-day process, we have a mixture of skills sharing where they do once-off workshops with theatre makers from the partners and us, and we provide all of the training on the workshop and on the exchange ourselves. We don't bring in outside trainers, which is a common enough feature across training programs in Europe, but we use the existing partners ourselves and them together to create the training for Erasmus Plus projects. So we would have workshops on stage combat, workshops on using your voice, workshops on movement and dance, whatever the partners specialize in. And one of their leaders would lead those morning workshops. And then in the afternoon, it's always about the issue or the theme that has been explored by this particular exchange, where another one of the partners would take a group of mixed people from different countries and work to create a piece of theatre over the whole week, researching on the issue, presenting on it at the end as a sort of a showcase performance. So we integrate theatre into the Erasmus Plus programs that way. But crucially, as I said, we integrate the partners' skills as well. So together we run every aspect of it. One partner, for example, in Spain might be very good at doing things like reflections and not so good at leading drama workshops. And so we would hand that element over to them. They would do creative evaluations and reflections every day in a different way with young people. Another partner might have great skills in technical tech stuff like blogs and video making and doing very short Instagram shoots, that sort of social media business. And they would have 2 people who would go around and do that. They would take care of that. All this would require a lot of planning, of course. And so we build the project together, which is why we tend to do stuff well in advance, at least a year beforehand. that we're planning stuff and that we're working together and saying, well, you could do this part and I could do this part and so on. And then we put in the application. And the most important thing we get from the partners when we're submitting the application is, first of all, what need is there for this particular project in your organization? And secondly, how will it help or develop your young people and your organization? So the impact. They're the two things we really take on board at the application stage. And in order to do that, in order to think about those two things, we need to know our partners. So we have in this network a way of working with them that we get to know them throughout the year outside of Erasmus Plus or outside of the European Solidarity Corps. So for example, we will have a play because we're a youth theatre and we invite them to come see it, just a simple thing like this. Or if it's live before COVID, we invited them to one or two to come and we paid for their flights. Now we can actually invite them all. So that's wonderful with COVID. We can invite them to come and see our work and have a discussion afterwards. Since COVID as well, we've been able to do something that we started, which is 6-month seminars, or 6-week seminars. So we bring our partners together, whoever can afford to or can have time to, every 6 weeks or so around a seminar in the morning, a bit like this, exchange of practice, to talk about something that's cropped up for them, to discuss a way that's happening in their youth theatre. So, for example, in those seminars, two issues emerged. One was that we were looking at sharing the news stories from across Europe. This is one of the things that happens. And we saw that for LGBTQI young people, it was getting harder and harder in Poland and harder in Hungary to express themselves against, stronger state repression. And so we talked about making a project that we could somehow be in solidarity with those young people. And we worked out that one of the best ways would be to do a 2-scale thing, to bring some young people from these areas to Ireland and bring the other partners in on that as well. But also then for us and the other partners to go to Hungary and to Poland as a sort of a group that says, look, we are here, we support young people in this way, we represent other kinds of European values, we stand with them. And so that's what we're planning at the moment, and that's going to be submitted as a project this year. So that's come out of those seminars, because we now know the needs of the partners and we're basing that project on that. That's for an Erasmus Plus project. For a European Solidarity Corps, which is where we bring volunteers to Ireland, and we send volunteers as well, but not so many. We bring volunteers to work with us for a year. This is a trickier one because you need to, I suppose, have a really good relationship with your partner so that they can support a young person who's maybe 22 or 23 or up to 30 for a year while they're here with us. And as we keep saying to young people, Ireland, it sounds great, coming up here to this part, the romance, the mythology, all of that, Newgrange, blah, blah, blah. But then you have dull, grey, dark and damp winters that last from October to March to now. You look out the window and everyone, when they sees a bit of sunshine, runs out to it. So, this climate is going to get on top of you. And if you're in a small town, where the only kind of interesting thing that's happening might be the project you're involved in, what are you going to do to combat your sort of encroaching sense of why did I leave home? So we need to work with the partners to help the young people motivate themselves. So in the European Solidarity Corps projects, we encourage the partners to have 6-week meetings every 6 weeks with the young people. And this has always been online. So it's not an additional thing now with COVID, now with Zoom and so on, it's easier. This is happening all the time to help motivate and support ESC volunteers. Especially they can connect back with somebody who knows them, and the partner will have had to work with that young person before they come on our project to prepare them, and to go through the volunteering agreement, which we and the partner draw up together with the young person. We spend a good bit of time on that. And all three of us discuss it and share it, and all three of us sign it before the young person comes here. So that's a legal document shared by three people, three entities, if you like. And in that document, we say what the legal obligation of the partner is in the volunteering agreement, so that they're clear, you know, that they might have to make a report, that they have to check in on their young person, the kind of things that would be in that report that are needed. How are they going to follow on afterwards when the young person comes home? Is it going to be a presentation and so on? So they're the kind of things that we look at in the agreement. It's quite long, that document. For other Erasmus Plus working relationships, we have templates that represent internal working agreements. You know, who's going to look after what on the project, how long are they going to take to do it, what happens if there's a problem, who do we go to, what do we do if there's an issue that none of us can foresee, like COVID. Now we're all doing this. We're working on how can we transfer this to online. So because Crooked House does a lot of in-person work with young people, we weren't so hot on administration. We still aren't. It falls by the wayside a lot because our work is hugely with young people. And we have managed through the partnership model to connect up with people who are wonderful at administration, and we use those skills. So we have a young person called Juan, for example, who's based in Spain, who loves administration work and designing templates and organizing structures for projects and applications. And he still works with us on a freelance basis. He came to us as a volunteer, but before that he was involved in Erasmus Plus projects. So in this way, we're keeping the life of the partnership alive by not just having it based around specific projects, but also seeing what is it we need and can we use other skills that are available in that vast continent, out there to help us. And then we in turn, for example, where we're contacted by the partners to say, what are we going to do now that Zoom has happened? Now the COVID has happened. This was last September. We're really running out of ideas. How are we going to work with our young people? So by then we had worked out how to do drama workshops on Zoom, and we had started to type them up and hold them in a folder. And we were able to share all those with our partners, send them out. And so they have made adaptations, or they've adapted those workshops to their own groups. And they in turn have sent them back with the adaptations in them, or adaptations in them. And that provided us with an idea for another project, the Partnership for Creativity that the European Union announced, which was a key action 2 strategic partnership, a once-off, if you like, to have a look at the how can the European Union and Erasmus Plus help in COVID times. And we put in an application to do more of these online workshops, 2-hour workshops, and publish them freely for everybody. So we're going to be working on that this year. But that project came out of the partnership. So I suppose I'm just really, I had other things to say, but like it would really be appropriate for people who had already done a few partnerships. So I'm just going to move past them and come back to the idea that if Erasmus Plus or the ESC did not exist, we would still be doing these partnership activities. We would still be using the network and building the network. And occasionally somebody doesn't feel that they belong to the network, or if a young person comes to us from a country where we don't have a partner and they really are good and we love what they're doing, they want to volunteer for a year, we will go to Salto or we'll go to the European Youth Forum to see what organizations are there who might be cultural, who could support them and have a remit or accreditation to send a volunteer. So we'll connect up cold with that person and try and get to provide a link or try and get to connect them with the young person. If it doesn't work out, that they're really maybe just a partner, a group or an organization in name, they don't do a lot of work with young people, then we move on and we select somebody else. We don't spend a lot of time with someone we don't know, if it's clear from the outset that it's not going to be an organization that's fully committed to doing what we do. So that's it really. I think that's all I have to say, but I think I would open it up to maybe questions, or Nora could add in other stuff for me that we can present if I've missed something out.
No, there's so much in there, Peter. I've been typing as you spoke, and you've mentioned so many really useful, valuable things. So thanks a million. And there is a question from Derval who asked, and Derval, I hope I interpret your question properly, but you asked, are they vetted? And I think that was in relation to young people going to other countries.
They are, and that is part of the work of the partnership. So we would partners actually vet their volunteers themselves before they send them to us. It's a double process, and then we send them the vetting documents and the procedures that they need to do before they come here. Our partners know this process and they know what's required. And it's much easier actually to vet them before they come here because of the need to show proof of address, which you can get easy enough if you're living in Madrid and you're living there with your parents, you'll have some evidence of that. But when you come here, trying to prove proof of address is very difficult if you don't have any state bill or document that will show you're living here. Yeah. So it's much easier to do all of that before they come here.
I think there's kind of different paradigms of vetting. There's our Garda vetting process that has to be engaged with, but then there's also the selection process that volunteers have when they engage with volunteers in the first place. Just that, I think it's just making sure that there's the right fit and shared values, and are open to committing and volunteering with projects locally and internationally. So all organizations would have quite a good selection process in place, and you need to demonstrate that in developing an application form. It's a specific question in the application: how do you select your volunteers? So Derval's just saying there, that is one of the issues I had, and thanks, didn't know you could vet someone who lived overseas who is coming to Ireland.
Same process, and that's quick.
Yeah, same process, and I guess that address, as Peter mentioned, is important to consider. Any other questions for Peter from anybody listening in? You can unmute. Yes, thank you, Christina.
I just wanted to say thanks to Peter, and because it was really valuable what you were sharing, and also that you see networks and like partnerships more than just working on a project. I think this is has a huge impact on the sustainability of the project, but also on the impact and the personal commitment. I was wondering if you could go back in time when you were starting out on partnerships, what would you recommend to your past self not doing at all? Like is there one learning when you were really starting out with these partnerships? What would you do different if you would have the chance to change the past?
It's very, very difficult. I think it has to do with I think with Erasmus Plus, we actually did wonderful stuff. It was like we did it, slowly, bit by bit, based on the needs. But with European Solidarity Corps, I would definitely change some things back when it was EVS. Because we began life in that by selecting volunteers directly. They would come to us, and then we had to follow up and find a partner for them to work with them, and actually a lot of organizations still do that, because and we do too. The volunteers see our project description and contact us directly. But part of our application process is that they have to have in their application, they have to have already made a relationship with a local organization that can send them before they apply to us. If they don't, we'll have them find one. But that is one thing I might change, that we would be anxious from the beginning to expand the network to try and include partners from different countries, as many as possible. The other thing is that I would try to bring myself up to speed a lot quicker on what was possible, that some organization in Sicily could actually act as a sending organization for a young person somewhere else. Now that we can use Zoom and that they can do meetings in this way, it frees it up a little bit so that, you don't have to be in person with the organization. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Nolene. Am I right in that, Nora, saying that you can be a sending organization in France with whom you have a relationship, and a person in Norway wants to come to you, they can be supported by the French organization?
Not that, no, not, I don't know if I'm understanding you correctly, Peter, but if I suppose the key to the sending piece of it, and as Peter has pointed out, certainly under the Solidarity Corps, lots of young people come directly to organisations that don't have a relationship with any sending organisation. Our guideline on that are I suppose we can't advise organisations necessarily, because every organisation is different and how they work is different, and what makes sense for an organisation might not make sense for another one. But what we would suggest is that you treat your partnership building the same way as you do a recruitment process. So if you're starting out and you don't have partners, that you think about your values, you think about the things that you want from a partner, your working methods. There, I think particularly in the area that Peter works in, I'm sure their attitudes to young people, their attitudes to the issues that the young people that you work with are facing, and how that organisation would see those things would be sort of an acid test of whether or not you're going to be able to work with them. The specific question that Peter is asking, I'm going to have to ask a little bit more about that, because I haven't heard that one before, Peter, that you would send a volunteer from one country with a sending organisation based in another country, because I don't know how they'd know each other, how they'd build a relationship.
It arose during COVID. It didn't arise before, because nobody could meet each other during COVID times. So it was like, we have a Hungarian volunteer who who studied in France. Traditionally, she would be expected to be sent by her Hungarian partner. But because she knows France and has studied there, she can work very well with the French partner and present material back to them. When she returns back to France, she can make a presentation online to their organization. She can still be involved with them, that kind of way.
But she isn't living in the country of the sending organisation. And I suppose what has absolutely come into focus during COVID is the national reality for the countries that volunteers come from, because what we've experienced in Lurgas is our national reality here in Ireland with regards to restrictions and lockdown and all of the different, I suppose, government guidelines can be night and day between what's going on in other European countries. So if somebody's coming from a country that the sending organisation isn't based in, I would have concerns, particularly around COVID, and the sending organisation's knowledge of what's happening in that country for the young person who's travelling from there to another country. So it absolutely wouldn't be something that we would recommend. If it's something that within the programme guide can be done, remains to be seen. If it can, obviously there'd need to be a lot of monitoring put in place, and it just wouldn't be recommended, simply because of all of those things and the national realities. Whether they may know the individual volunteer due to past experience, but do they know what's going on in that country with regards to even the regulations from the national agency in the country that the volunteer is coming from and stuff like that. So there'd just be a lot of questions around it.
I think those are things that I'd find out more about, Christina.
Yeah, I think Peter mentioned the agreement, and I think now what's in the last year, the agreement has a particular focus on the COVID context, and that's where you discuss so that people are clear on the expectations because of the different realities, that when you go to a country, you're clear on what's required.
Yeah.
In those activity agreements. So I'm just going to, it's nearly 10 past 11 already. Is there another question at this stage? I know there's very varied experiences in the room. Some people are new to this. Any questions before we move on? And we can do another questions and answers towards the end. Are you okay, Sinead? This might be all very new to you.
Yeah, no, grand.
All good?
No, it's
Okay.
very interesting. Yeah.
Great. That's good to hear. So I was going to send people out into breakout rooms for the next session, but we're such a small group. I think we can just have the conversation here, and it would be really good to have Nolene and Peter's input into this as well. And some of it will be a recap on what Peter has just discussed with us. So just give me a second and I will share my screen. So I had posed the question, how can we more effectively manage partnerships? And I had split it up into the before and at application stage, during an implementation, and then towards the end and reporting. So maybe we could spend a minute just thinking about how we can effectively manage partnerships at this early stage. And Peter has already mentioned something where you said, Peter, that you're almost in planning with your partners a year in advance of a project. So I'm going to start off the conversation with that. And then if anyone else has anything to add to this, please, and you might have good experiences yourselves in your own projects that you'd like to add to this board. So ideas for effectively managing partnerships in that early stage. Please unmute and tell me what you think.
Can I say something?
Please do, yes.
Okay. Definitely also from my experience, and this is also what kind of Peter mentioned, I liked his idea with get to know them in a different context than the project, is maybe you have worked with them before in like, not a project, but maybe you have been in there are like multiple contexts where you could meet them, but it would be great if you're not starting out with this organization just on the project, but you met them like in a completely different context. So this is one of my experiences where I had like very good outcomes from. So because you established a different relationship, it wasn't focused on the project from the first place, and on those needs, but you had to get to know the organization and the people, of course, behind that differently on a different basis. And what else?
Did I do justice to how I describe it? So getting to know your partners in a different context to the project.
Yes.
So I gave Peter's example. He did the exchange of ideas seminars. Do you have another example of how you might do that? No.
I liked actually the idea of Peter, that they are now doing these topical seminars, and then through this it makes so much sense for me. And this, I think, is one of the best tips that we would get when it comes to establishing partnerships. So try to gather the people around a topic that they're all interested in, and then you can see is something coming out of this.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course, another thing is like this before an application stage, definitely define roles. I mean, there are these plans and worksheets you can work with, but don't be shy. Sometimes people, especially if you're starting out on a project, you don't dare to say, these are your tasks and you should do this. or of course you should decide it on this together. But sometimes if you have like a template for this, work through it, design the roles, and make clear from the beginning who is responsible for what. for example, at the Wheel, we're using also this RACI model, this RACI, and this also helps, especially in partnerships, to say who's like leading on this, who's responsible, who has ownership on this task, but who needs to be informed, and all of this. So there are different models. What I'm just saying is it sometimes helps to really
will you repeat the model? I'm not familiar with it, sorry. How did you spell it?
RACI. This is just, you can also use this for organizational tasks and all of this, but in partnerships it's also especially helpful. You just have a language and a terminology, so you can use terms, and then you can say, okay, like to define like who's responsible for what in this project.
Super, thank you. I'll look into that. RACI, I'm not familiar with that one. Thank you. There's loads there, and yes, I also like that idea of the thematic seminars. You really do get to know, and I liked how Peter emphasized that that's where the need emerged in planning the next project. And Peter is saying there that each partner can invite to the seminars another entity that they would introduce, so it's a really good way of getting to know partners and what they do. Thanks a million, Christina. And Derval has also added there that in her organization, they ask partners to send presentations about themselves and what they do. So they share information about their work via presentation. So that's also really good idea, because you can really focus on that strengths area too, and in terms of developing roles and responsibilities within the partnership. So thanks a million, Derval. Yeah, and we've posted the link to Salto further up the chat. So Salto is a really good space to engage in training, and also the national agencies run contact making seminars, which are specifically aimed at certain actions of the programs. So perhaps it's Key Action 2 or European Solidarity Corps volunteering, and you can go and meet volunteers in view of developing partnerships for grant applications. Yeah, so Derval is saying that that's their way of integrating staff into their partnership. So that's a really good point. I think it should be added here is yeah, identifying the key stakeholders within your organization, if there are any that can support the development of projects. So key staff members or volunteers, because capacity is always an issue. And I liked how Peter, like it seems like you managed to enhance and develop capacity by developing your partnership. You were able to do more and have more skills and people involved. Okay.
Also an area that we look at, like when you send in your application, we do, you know, expect to see detail on how you plan to, if you don't already know who your partners are, but what are the things that you're going to do in order to ensure that when you do find partners, that you do know each other and that there has been groundwork done, if you like. So it's, again, back to that, it's almost like a recruitment process. And I think Peter alluded to it as well, that with the whole Zoom takeover, we can have conversations with people and we can meet people now that we wouldn't have previously. Everything would have been the email and maybe the odd phone call with a partner, but to develop those relationships and to really get to know the people that you're working with. Because I think sometimes there's particularly in the Solidarity Corps, where a young person wants to come to your organisation, there can be a lot of pressure just to develop a partnership in order to get that young person into your organisation, and maybe the actual partnership is secondary. But then if things start to unravel a little bit, if there are things going on in the young person in the organisation where there's pressure points, or where you and they may need additional support, and if that partnership hasn't been developed and worked on, you're all of a sudden trying to work with partners that you don't really know, that you might not understand their working methods or where they're coming from. And then obviously when this time last year, when we were hit with COVID, things like that, I suppose the cracks began to show in relationships and in partnerships that hadn't got that strong foundation in the first place, and where some organisations here in Ireland were left a little bit stranded, trying to negotiate how to get young people home safely in light of COVID, what was happening in their home countries, trying to connect with partners that maybe they'd only ever emailed before, that they never actually had a conversation with. So I think it's really important to get to know them as people as well as partners, and to understand their working methods. And the whole cultural stuff as well can be, I think, underestimated, and cultural differences, and the fact that your relationship can be influenced by that, and assumptions that we make as well about things, even just timekeeping and the simple things in life that we take for granted. So.
Thanks a million, Nolene. And I guess I'll just say there that in some applications, you don't have to know your partners in advance, such as some European Solidarity Corps, but in the Erasmus Plus, you would know your partner already and be entering details in the application. So it depends on the...
Well, and I suppose the subtle difference in it, though, Nora, in the Solidarity Corps, what we want to see is your plan. You might not know them, but we do want to see your plan on how you're going to build the partnership when you do identify people, and what that will look like for the duration of the project. So
super. And I guess there's a lot of material that would aid that plan here now already, isn't there? Okay, well, listen, we'll have a look. I'm just wondering, does anyone have any thoughts on, when you get to the implementation and reporting stage, are there additional considerations for these stages of the partnership?
It kind of follows on what Nolene was saying. What at this point, the places, the times that we have had difficulty with a volunteer, they have had difficulty with us, really, is to do with cultural unawareness, and maybe that they were from a less liberal environment, perhaps, put it that way, and they come and they're not expecting what is in front of them, or what happens over the few months that's here. And so each of those cases, there has been a weak relationship with the partner organization, and the partner organization really didn't do effective preparation to say, well, do you know what Ireland is like, and so on. You know, we can only do so much. So in that sense, it's very important to have a lot of similarity, if you like, to look at their organization and see, even though they're from a very different culture, are they interested in the same kind of developmental issues that you are interested in? Are they open to learning as much as you are open to learning? Or is it something else? And that can be on the website, getting to know them. Exactly, I think Nolene put it perfectly earlier. You were talking about their ethical values, their statements, their point of view, their world view. Because we are really interested in taking on people who are very different to us, from North Africa, from Lebanon, from around Europe, because that's a huge way for our young people to be exposed to difference and to develop resilience. But it's sometimes not great for the young volunteer who comes here and they're shocked. You know, they still think this is a very strict country, controlled with strong values about, you know, religion and stuff.
Really interesting to think about how your considerations for partnership links back to your ultimate goal of building resilience in young people. Very holistic. Anyone else want to comment there on experiences they've had that might enhance partnership at this stage of a project? Okay, and then the reporting area, and I guess this is where all partners need to really step up, or where you might lose a partner. So if anyone has any ideas for effectively managing this. I know in my experience, partners I've worked with who are just new to Erasmus and new to European Solidarity Corps and Mobility Tool don't realise from the onset what's required at reporting stage, so that I almost begin negotiations with my partners, or I will do in future, in starting at looking at the reporting stage, because there's a lot of material that needs to be gathered along the way and documented. So to have that included in the early templates and agreements.
I echo exactly the same, Nora. That's what we're doing this year as well. Put that spell it out in the volunteering agreement. This is the first year we've tried it.
Yeah.
And actually some partners have got back to us and said, well, what do you mean? How much work is involved here? I don't know if I have the time.
Yeah.
And so then there's a discussion that's opened up about, well, then maybe you're not the kind of partner that would be most effectively benefiting from this.
Yeah, you need to check, do partners have capacity?
Yeah. And it's you sort of start at the end and work your way back. You know, if you look at everything that's going to be needed and what are the reports and how often and how much do you need to be in touch without it becoming onerous. You know, your communication needs to make sense as well, and what you're doing with each other needs to make sense to what you're doing, rather than just doing it because, you know, you're ticking a box and it has to be done, but not leaving the reporting piece till for the Solidarity Corps, when you come to the final report stage, the lead organisation, so whoever has applied for the grant generally will complete the final report. But a lot of times final reports come in and there isn't a mention about the partner other than our partnership worked well, and that's it. And what we need to see is, how did that partnership work well? What was the interaction with the volunteers and the partner during the lifetime of the project, and what did that look like? And to get a sense of it, for the host organisation, they may have thought the project was really successful, but what did the sending organisation feel? What was their impression of how the project went, and what will the impact be on their side? Because a lot of the time the impact is concentrated on the actual carrying out of the project in the host organisation, but the project is the all of the partners, and they should also be impacted by the experience, and they should also have learned and developed and have opinions on how the project ran. So there should be some way in your, as Nora says, in your original template and your original plan, to pick those things up during the project lifetime, so that you're not left at the end trying to look back on 12 months of either a very busy year or, as we all know, hectic with COVID and things changing at the drop of a hat, and, you know, all sorts of regulations and everything just being out of our control. So to make sure you have those things almost like a tapestry throughout the project, so you can pick them up then when you're pulling your report together.
That's a lovely way of looking at of your report as a tapestry. I'll use that. It's much nicer than what I call it at the moment. Sorry.
Can I ask you, Nolene, or Nora, if it's possible to do video reports? So to have an interview with the partner, 2 or 3 scattered throughout the duration of the project, including at the end, and have those uploaded to a private link.
Wonderful. Yeah, if you could, obviously you'd have your narrative of your report and just put them links into it. And if we could see that, that would be great.
It's easier for us to do that than to write it. I think that's the big thing with us. We could have maybe a lot of stuff in the video and some summary of it in the narrative. We're going to try that this year anyway. So
I think, recording video testimonies is really powerful and can be used in your dissemination as well. And in our online world, it's really, we've got better resources now to do this effectively via Zoom and all the rest. Okay, it's 26 minutes past 11 already. I have one more slide to show, and then if anyone has any questions before we sign out, this is just a recap that Nolene actually had developed, and I think it's really useful. And we'll be sending out the slides, including the ideas documented on the Jamboard, to you afterwards. So to recap, partners should be active partners and not passive participants. So I think that's emerged strongly in the conversations we've just had. And partners should be involved throughout the project lifecycle. And I guess we emphasize that this starts way before the application is ever submitted. Ensure that you have clear documented agreements outlining roles, responsibilities, and a communication process. Ensure your agreement includes a relationship between the volunteer and the partners, specifically for European Solidarity Corps projects. and ensure you and your partner plan together for all sorts of scenarios and risk assessments. And I guess COVID-19 has really highlighted the kinds of risk assessments that needs to be done. And I guess other risks that have come up in the past is a young person or a student might experience a mental health issue, or they might need some kind of treatment. And these are all the kind of risks where partners have to be able to respond and have a plan in place so that everything is not really reactionary and stressed, that there's a process in place to deal with these issues. And I guess they evolve as you gain experience, I think, but being part of these conversations is a really good place to think about these things. So has anyone got any final questions or comments before we sign out?
Could I ask if it's possible from Nolene and Nora that maybe there might be a session for people running ESC, just a session for running projects to facilitate for an hour to share tips with us, with each other, since we don't really meet that much.
You're on mute, Nolene.
We could look at maybe dedicating one of our learning networks to partnerships, Peter. I know we've our annual meetup on Friday, but we could certainly discuss maybe having our next learning network and focus that on partnerships and sharing, just a conversation among yourselves, among the beneficiaries, to share their partners and their networks.
Yeah, because it's more of what Nora said, that, and I totally echo that. I learn all the time moving forward, and most of the things I pick up are from other people who have been doing it, and saying things like, did you know you can do this, or you can do that, or here's what we do, blah, 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 that kind of thing. About everything, not just partnerships.
I think that's important as well, to know that Lergas facilitate these networking events for beneficiaries to come together and just network and do exactly what Peter just said. This is what we did when this happened, and it's just so helpful, and there's a strong sense of solidarity amongst the then when you realize that everyone's experiencing challenges, but that the impact always makes it worthwhile. I think it's what I take. Okay, well, it's 11:30. Thanks so much, Christina, Sinead and Derval, for hanging in there with us to the end.
Thanks to you.
It's valuable, and we will send on the follow-up documents and see you again down the line. That's me done. Peter, thanks. I always learn something from you every time as well. And Nolene, do you want to say the final word there?
Yeah, just thanks very much. Thank you, Nora. That was great. And Peter, and to everyone who hung in there with us. We were a small group, but it was very interesting. We'd lots of food for thought. So thanks a million, and we'll follow up, as Nora says, with the presentations and some more documents. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Very interesting.